Well, welcome back as we continue in our journey through the Summa Theologia. I'm Dave Palmer. This is question number 9. We are now back on track as Thomas is going to go into the 5th of the 7 attributes of God. After, as we talked about yesterday, he took a little pause and talked about the existence of God in things in order to better understand the infinity of God. And one of the interesting things about this particular question is that there are only 2 articles in this question, which is interesting because in a few days we're going to have a question with 13 articles. And so I think the reason why Thomas only felt he needed 2 articles in this question is, as you see, the immutability of God is going to be very easily explained by understanding the first 4 attributes, because he's going to refer back. It's almost as if he's saying, if you understand the first 4 attributes, which were simplicity, perfection, goodness, and infinity, it only follows that he also would be immutable. And so you're going to see this is almost like a review, which is nice because some of this, the lessons that we've learned so far have been a little bit complicated. And so this is going to be one that you say, yeah, well, that makes sense. I think if it's, if you understand these first 4 attributes of God, well, it follows that he's also going to be immutable as well. So let's move on to the first of the questions of only 2 articles that he's going to have, whether God is altogether immutable. And I have a question, I have a picture here of the seasons, and so just kind of a picture that represents what we see in the natural world is that everything is always changing, right? We see change everywhere around us. The pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus once said that you can never put your foot into the same river twice. And what he meant by that is a river is always changing. It's never going to be the same because it's always flowing, it's always changing. And so I thought that was a cool observation. So our world is always changing, but also there is a certain stable element to it as well. There's something constant about the world. And so these two, it's kind of a dichotomy that is interesting. And that, well, the stability part is God. And that's what we're really learning in this 9th question of the Summa, is that God doesn't change, right? So Thomas says, first, because it was shown above that there is some first being whom we call God. So again, he's already referring back, and that this first being must be pure act without the admixture of potentiality. There we go. So he's referring back to simplicity, because remember, the key to simplicity in question number 3 of the Summa was that God is the pure act of being, and he has no potentiality. Nothing ever happens to him. He doesn't change. He can't be acted upon. So he's saying, well, if that's the case, then it's naturally to be understood that if nothing can be acted on him, he can't move, then he's immutable, right? So it's almost kind of a no-brainer, that this one as well. Everything which is in any way changed is in some way in potentiality. So my hand is here now, it's in potentiality of being over here, and now it's in potentiality of being here. And you notice that that's the way our world, we're always in potentiality to be thinking things or to be moving or to get older. And so that's just part of our everyday life. Hence, it is evident that it is impossible for God to be in any way changeable, right? The second thing is that everything which is moved, there is some kind of composition to be found. And if you remember, we talked about matter and form that comes together to form what we call a composite. Okay, matter and form is a thing, and that matter and form is going to have some kind of physical quality to it, and anything that's physical is going to be able to be moved, and God can't move because he's infinite, as we learned two days ago, and so therefore he is unchangeable. All right, thirdly, because everything which is moved acquires something by its movement and attains to what it had not attained previously. But since God is infinity there, comprehending in himself all the plenitude of perfection. Okay, that's a reference to the fact that all created perfections exist in God. All right, contemplating the plenitude of perfection. Isn't that just beautiful? That God, it's like an intellectual exercise where God's intellect and his will are all the same because God is, right? I just love that wording. Of all being, he cannot acquire anything new, nor extend himself to anything whereto he was not previously extended, right? So God is infinite. He's everywhere, as we learned 2 days ago, and therefore he can't move. And he's also perfect, so why would he change? Think about it. When you woke up this morning, you turned off your alarm clock, you probably got in the shower, you went to work, you took your kids to the soccer practice. Anytime we're moving or doing anything, we're trying to get to some state of greater perfection, because if we were perfect, we wouldn't move. We wouldn't need to, right? So the very fact that I'm talking, the very fact that you're learning, that you even jumped on this YouTube channel, is that you desire some greater degree of perfection. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be here either, right? But God doesn't have that limitation. All right, so that's the first article. The second article, as you might have anticipated, is that now that he says that God is immutable, he's going to say, well, is God the only being that's immutable? Does it belong to him alone? Is it proper to God to be immutable? And he says God alone is altogether immutable, whereas every creature is in some way mutable. And now listen as I read this and tell me what this reminds you of. For all creatures before they existed were possible, not by any created power, since no creature is eternal. Interesting, because eternal is going to be the next attribute. That's number 6. He's foreshadowing something that he hasn't talked about yet. He hasn't talked about eternity yet. But by the divine power alone, inasmuch as God could produce them into existence. Now, we talk about possibility. We are possible. God is necessary. You should say, that sounds familiar. That was the third of the 5 proofs for the existence of God in question number 2, article number 3. All right. Okay. Thus, as the production of a thing into existence depends on the will of God, so likewise it depends on his will that things should be preserved. That's what we learned about yesterday, the existence of God in things. Okay. I know I'm driving this point in, but he's summarizing here. Okay. So hopefully this is a day where you can say, okay, this is summary. Okay. This is review. All right. For review for the test, right? All right, the final paragraph, the last thing we're going to read in this article number 2, he's going to talk about the different kinds of creatures and how they're all immutable. They're all mutable in some way, unlike God, who is immutable. He says, thus, in every creature there is a potentiality to change, either as regards substantial being, as is the case of things corruptible. Corruptible things are things that have bodies, like us and birds and snakes. Okay, when we die, our bodies corrupt. And so that's things that have the matter and the form together, right? Or as regards locality only, as is the case of celestial bodies. Thomas talks about celestial bodies. These are the planets and the moon. They don't decompose, but they move. And movement itself is showing that there is mutability in them. Now, this is interesting. Tell me what you think he's saying about this. Or as regards the order to their end and the application of their powers to divers objects. Okay, he's talking about angels here. He's saying, okay, angels don't have bodies. The bodies can't corrupt of an angel because it doesn't have a body. But the order of their end means the exercise of their will. They can choose, good or evil. And the application of their powers to divers objects means that angels are in a place and they can move. Physically, they can move. We'll cover angels in a future lesson, as is the case with the angels. And universally, all creatures generally are mutable by the power of the Creator, in whose power is their existence and non-existence. Hence, since God is in none of these ways mutable, it belongs to him alone to be altogether immutable. All right, so if you have watched the previous 8 videos, everything I just said is like, yeah, okay, I got that. I understand that because it's all review. So the first 8 videos would make us believe and understand that God cannot change because he is simple, because he's good, he's perfect, and he is infinite, and that kind of creature cannot change. Tomorrow we'll get into eternity, the 6th attribute of God. And as you know, anything that moves inside of time. And so time or eternity is going to follow on immutability. If something doesn't change, it's also going to be outside of time. And as you might expect, that is going to be our good God, who is absolutely eternal. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you're enjoying your journey through the Summa. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for Wake Up with the Summa, and we'll get into the eternity of God. God bless you. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us.